ended up coaching at Colorado College for one season of 1990. And then I ended up being lucky enough to get the assistant job at Yale, which is around the time when I met your dad. And I actually coached you, Corey, back when you were Cold Spring Harbor back in 1995. And I started working heavily and ended up coaching. My salary back then at Yale was $10,000 a year.
Wow.
And by the time I left 7 years later, though, it did, cranked up to about 18. So that was a little better. But I had to figure out ways to stay in this game, get married, have a family. And so I just was doing a lot of coaching of the youth level. Got lucky enough to be the head coach at the University of Denver from 99 to 2009. It was an amazing opportunity and experience to build what became the first season of Denver as a Division I program. We went to 2 NCAA tournaments. Back then, the Great Western Lacrosse League was the league we were in, and Notre Dame, Ohio State, Denver were kind of the three main teams in there, with other teams kind of coming and going, like Butler. Air Force, of course, was in there the whole time. Fairfield kind of came and went. And then after leaving Denver, I founded a company called 3D Lacrosse in 2009 and grew it into being, just this massive operation with 80 full-time employees, 15 markets, over 200 club teams. And it was all founded and based really on my passion for learning and teaching and sharing the game of lacrosse. Throughout all this time, I was really just mostly talking lacrosse with people, just like we are today. Mm-hmm. Sold that 3 years ago, and then I have a non-compete, so I can't do the things that I used to do. So I just don't do camps and clinics, and tournaments, and travel teams. I do digital. It allows me to kind of do what we're doing here, record things, and just have an opportunity to study, share, learn the sport of lacrosse with all kinds of digital online, online educational products, courses, coaches training, players training, remote coaching, video analysis, podcasts. It's been really neat. It's been a fun journey, and, feel like there's just a lot more to go.
No doubt. And one thing, just kind of backtracking a little bit, in your days when you were coaching in college, I always thought it was kind of cool. Denver, the pioneer, something that kind of you were for the sport and what you're doing with that program. What was it like, kind of like building something up at the highest level? And, what's maybe a memory that stands out to you, in your days coaching at Denver?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Well, first of all, becoming a head coach was such an important thing for me. It was such a big deal. It was such an amazing opportunity. I'm a worker by nature, and I dug in and just started working really hard. But I also just always maintained this feeling like, we're legit. We're going to be in the Final Four in 5 years, and I just had this belief that we were going to be able to do something incredibly special. And it kind of, along the way, I just really focused on little wins. When could we, if we got a recruit, if we got a big time recruit just to take a visit. I mean, no one had heard of the University of Denver in the summer of 1998, unless you were a hockey fan, because the hockey program was well known, but lacrosse wise, really nobody had heard of it. Everybody knew of Denver, so there was a little bit of a allure. And we just got working. And in 2000, my second season, we had this amazing upset of Penn State and this amazing upset of Brown. And we got ranked for the first time in the top 20. And it was, just a great sort of stepping stone. But, during processes like this, you're taking steps forward, as far as the infrastructure, but you might take steps back along the way. Finally, in 2003, my first full group of recruits, we won our conference. 2004, we knocked off Virginia when they were the #1 team in the country. 2005, we had like this awesome recruiting class with like Matt Brown was a senior. And all we had to do was beat Fairfield in our last game. And we go to the NCAA tournament, and we lost to them, and it was heartbreaking. We had beaten Notre Dame for the first time that year. It was like this, we were on this great trajectory, but man, we just, by the way, Fairfield at the time had Greg Downing, Matt Bocklett, Mike Bocklett, these a bunch of guys that ended up being, at the time, nobody knew how good they were. Mm-hmm. They've been been perennial all-pro players. 2006, we finally crack it. We thought we had graduated this class that we would never replace. The class of 2005 was an awesome class. But we did. We had Jeff Snyder at the Face-Off X, and we just kept developing. We were getting better as a program, and we made the NCAA tournament that year, won our league, lost in the first round to Maryland, and then 2 years later in 2008, we did not win the league. We tied for a league championship, but we made it as an at-large berth to the NCAA tournament, and that was really cool. So honestly, when I think about this whole thing, it was just an amazing experience to have a chance to build something along the way. And I think I even got a chance to coach against you one time, Cor.
Yeah, absolutely. My dad and I were just talking about Denver's just stadium, because we went our annual college trip. One of the stops is UMass Amherst. Cool, such a cool stadium, because like literally the campus surrounds the lacrosse stadium. So kids, as the coaches are dropping F-bombs, like students are walking to class, like, right along like the end zones and right around it. It's just like, it's such a cool environment. But we were like, hey, what was some of the best places that we went to, and some of the favorite, best places that I ever played at? I mean, Denver, without a doubt, was one of them, because it kind of gave that same vibe. It was right in the heart of campus, so to speak, or maybe on the edge there. But such a cool, unique feel. It always filled up. You had actual like fans of Denver lacrosse. Like that's when you built something special, when like people are coming out to look up to your players, your program, and your team. And that's so cool. It's something we're seeing now, like on the girls' side of things at Stony Brook. Like Joe Spallina was telling us when he first got there, the only people coming to games were like parents, and now it's like girls just local in the area are like Stony Brook lacrosse fans. They come to watch the games, and like that's just so telling of what you built and what's become of the program. So it's pretty cool to see. Now let's talk 3D and what you're up to now a little bit, because you do so many different things. You wear a lot of hats as a college coach. Now you kind of go a little bit lower in terms of helping players develop at the youth, through high school, help through the recruiting process. What was it like, and what'd you learn from like maybe your experience doing that as opposed to college coaching?
Yeah, well, and thanks for asking. I have 3 kids, and so while I was coaching college lacrosse, I was coaching youth lacrosse and doing stuff with my kids. So it was kind of natural. And probably the coolest thing about the 3D transition was, for me as a college coach, like I couldn't put it down. Like I literally was 24/7 thinking about my recruits, thinking about, whatever, somebody, when you get that phone call on Sunday morning, that dreaded phone call on a Sunday morning, this stuff would just eat away at me. But then all of a sudden, when I moved on, I was able to actually be present with my kids and my family. And I'm still working my butt off, because I like to work, and I've got goals, and, I'm an entrepreneur and I love the game, but I was able to just go coach my kids. I got to coach boys across, girls across. And then really with 3D, I just wanted to stay in lacrosse. I didn't know exactly where it was going to go. I certainly didn't have some grand idea that I would create the biggest lacrosse company, in the country. I just really wanted to get started on figuring out a way to stay in lacrosse and make a living. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of grew. And along the way, the whole club thing came along, because I wanted to be able to coach my son and his friends, and then my daughters. And so I kind of coached high school along the way, youth club. As far as recruiting goes, I mean, I've seen it from every side, as a dad of boys and girls, of an early recruit, of a late bloomer, as a Division I coach, as a club guy, and now in this world where I do a fair amount of remote coaching, and part of what I do is sort of help people from an advice perspective, and where possible from an advocacy perspective. But it's just been really neat, and I find it interesting, literally, to study the game on every single level. Whether it was I learned so much, Corey, coaching you and Gitz and all the guys that were your age at Cold Spring Harbor. I literally learned so much from coaching Cold Spring Harbor Huntington way back in 95 or something, just as much as I'll learn from, preparing for a Division I game. There's endless stuff in this game to learn, and that's just what interests me.
Yeah, it's so true. We always talk about how it's like a thinking man's game. There's so many intricacies which you try to dive into deeper than pretty much anyone I've ever known, which is really cool. And now you're starting to use technology to do that. You want to talk a little bit about how you use tech to basically just improve, your own knowledge for the game, and also how you expand the knowledge of other maybe players, coaches, etc. out there?
Sure. Well, like I said, when I sold 3D, I wanted to stay and do something in the sport. And I knew that digital was going to be the way to do it. I really had no idea what I was going to do. I didn't have like a plan of how I was going to do it. But I also know that video has been what has been the biggest impact on me probably as a coach, is watching film. You can't really know what happened until you watch the film. If you thought you played really well and you watch the film, you realize your team wasn't that good. If you thought your team was terrible, you watch the film, you realize you weren't that bad. The same holds true for practice. The same holds true no matter what you thought you saw live is different when you watch it on video. And therefore it's a must. And I knew that somehow I was going to use video and digital to try to teach the game. So I sort of kicked it off by doing video analysis, really of just some daughters of friends of mine. I was like, yeah, send me 3 games and I'll break it down and give you feedback, and figured out how to do voiceover and draw on the screen with telestration. And then I kicked it back to them, and they were like, oh my God, that's like the best thing I've ever seen. It's the best thing I've ever spent money on. I was like, well, it was free. So I kind of went down that path, and then I really wanted to go down the path of remote coaching too, of working with athletes remotely, which is really interesting. And I do it just how we're doing it now, over a video conference call. And we watch film, we break down film. I teach them things. I put them on a trajectory for getting better that they would probably otherwise not be on. And the results have been awesome. And then the last thing has really been the online education piece, where I've really created a lot of content, whether it be free content with my blog or my podcasts, or whether it be subscription-based content with my coaches training programs and the academies. If anybody is interested and they check out the blog and you're like, wow, that's pretty cool, keep diving in. You're going to love it. The coaches training stuff is like literally so deep with content, but the free content gives you a pretty good taste of it. The podcast, I had, 26,000 listeners this past month, last 30 days. So it's really been cool. And I'm pretty much just doing what I like to do, which is watch lacrosse, talk about lacrosse, and do what we're doing right now.
Yeah, no doubt. I was going to mention, I saw one of your video analysis. I think it was an analysis you did. I'm not sure when. It was of Kylie Allmiller, because I ran a shooting clinic with her last night. I mean, forget about, what she's become as a player. Like the way she breaks down how to shoot the rock the right way consistently, mechanics, and just how she connects with the girls is like, it's unbelievable. I learned 5 things in a 1-hour clinic we did together, which was really cool. We had like 40 girls just, buzzing from 3rd grade to 8th grade, and she's great. And that analysis you did on her was awesome. It talked about her game in ways I've never seen anyone talk about it. So that's got to be super impactful and beneficial for players that you work with and all that good stuff, which is cool. So not to get too much away from the JM3 stuff, I'm just curious, you put that really nice wall together behind you. Talk about what that wall means to you and why you picked some of those photos in there, because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I've been sitting in this office for a couple of years doing recordings just like this, and I always had the green screen behind me, and I was like, man, I really wish I had an awesome lacrosse office, kind of like back in the day. And so finally, my wife granted me permission to do this, and we picked pictures of, it's mostly of my family, of my kids. Like I said, I have a son who's a junior at Georgetown. There's pictures from, I got to coach him in high school. There's pictures of Coach Herman, who passed 4 years ago. That was a really big mentor for him and a great friend of mine. And then there's pictures of his Minto Cup championship from 2018 against Jeff Teat and the Brampton Excelsiors. And then there's tons of pictures of my daughters. My daughter Emily is at ASU. My daughter Lucy is in high school, and I get to coach that high school. So I'm coaching girls high school right now, which is a total blast. And of course, not have the Brown State representation, whether it was me playing in Placid or this picture right behind me there of 1987 at Princeton. So pretty fun stuff.
That's awesome. Let's talk about you coaching the girls game a little bit. I wanted to, one thing we've talked a lot about at our office and when we sit down and discuss just kind of like current events is Kobe. What's his impact on you, and like how was his relationship with his daughters? How does that kind of reflect like the relationship you have with your own daughters and maybe the girls that you coach up now, at the high school level?
Yeah, great question. Well, first of all, I was just so shocked at that terrible news of Kobe and his daughter and all those folks on the helicopter. The way that he referred to himself as a girl dad really resonated with me because I'm a girl dad too. Luckily, I have a boy and girl, so I feel very blessed. But when you have daughters and they've got dreams that are the same as your boys, and you get to be a part of those dreams, it's really special. And so to be able to coach my son for all those years, and then to be able to coach my daughter Emily, mostly in club. I didn't get to coach her in high school much. And then my daughter Lucy, coaching your kid in high school is so special. You're a part of some of the best memories of their lives, and you get to be there and witness it. And luckily, they've been great kids and team players, so it makes it easier on a coach when your kids are trying to do the right things for the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, without a doubt. That's something I've always noticed with Colin, just because I've built a relationship with him. Fortunately, he's helped coach up our kids in the box ranks, and like just the messages he's constantly like teaching the kids and reinforcing is just about making the right play. He's and it pays off because like I'll never forget it. He was coaching with us in the box ring a couple years ago, and we were running a girls' high school session. Our box program's unique, where like every other hour you have boys coming in, girls coming in, different ages, different grades. And it was like the high school girls session, and there was like 4 new girls that just stepped onto the rink, and I was like, oh wow, like all right, we got 4 new girls, literally first time picking up a stick, and the first thing Colin said was like, who knows, one of those girls might be incredible, and like that's the perspective he had, which is something that I'm sure you'd be proud of, because it's so true. Like it doesn't matter when a girl or guy picks up a stick and when they get involved, if they have the right coaches around them and inspire them, they love it. Like they could be really good at it, which I thought was really cool about him, and something that is a true reflection on how not only you've raised them but coached him and your daughters, which is really cool. So let's talk about all the great things you're doing in the media. You mentioned the video analysis. You mentioned you have a podcast. Want to talk a little bit about like your lacrosse weekend and maybe other things that we haven't mentioned just yet that you're doing in media that you really enjoy, and just something that you think is adding value to people's lives in the lacrosse world?
For sure. Yeah, I started a blog about 2 years ago called A Lacrosse Weekend, and it's been really fun. I like to write. I've really messed around with sort of different formats. Usually what I'm talking about is content that would be for coaches, learning how to coach, players that want to get better at playing, parents. I always have, not always, but I very frequently have recruiting types of information in there. Sometimes it's just funny stories. I used to make it used to be a little bit more current events oriented than it is now. Now it is really more of evergreen content. You could go back, from last June, and most of the content would be relevant to the topics that I just sort of covered. So that's what I'm trying to do, is educate people and give them an opportunity to look at cool videos, to read interesting stories, interesting perspectives. I feel like I'm learning something. If you ask my wife, I'll like every other day, I'll be like, oh my God, I had the best idea. And so I just share that stuff. So that's my blog, comes out on Saturdays. The podcasts, I started the podcast. It'll be 2 years in June. And I just started interviewing my friends. The funny thing is about these podcasts is they're literally just the conversations that I've had for 30 years that I just wasn't recording. Mm-hmm. I just started recording them.
Sure.
And they're awesome. They're fun. My standard is similar to your sort of model here, where I kind of chat about their lacrosse journey and their mentors along the way. And then we kind of get up to present day. and talk about philosophy. In fact, it's all about lacrosse philosophy. The name of it is kind of a mouthful. It's called the Philocrossophy Podcast because it's essentially joining the two words lacrosse and philosophy together. But I've since started a podcast I call the In-Season Podcast with PLL Chaos head coach and my college buddy, Andy Towers. So that's been a total blast. We just break down his top 20 each week, talk about the matchups, talk about the great games and players. And then 3 weeks ago, I started a brand new women's lacrosse podcast called Inside the Eight. And I do it with Colleen McGarity, who was just an awesome person, a great coach, a great mentor to my daughter, was a 3-time national champion at Northwestern, was an All-American, coached at Colorado. And she and I kind of break down Division I games. We talk about strategy. We talk about skills. We interview a coach each week. Like today, we interviewed Katrina Dowd from North Carolina. It's pretty much an evergreen podcast. I mean, we do reference games, but the information and content in there would be very much relevant. And then finally, I talk a lot about recruiting both in my women's podcast and my Philocrossophy podcast because parents like you guys, you're trying to provide information. They're getting so much misinformation on what they should be doing and what they should be focused on that we're trying to help people out. So, that's those are the sort of the main things that have been keeping me busy outside of the actual products.
So since we have about 3 minutes left here, I always like to ask the question of you have a lot of experience helping and actually recruiting players. So as it relates to recruiting, what's maybe one piece of advice that, if you can just drop one thing for anyone listening, what would that be? And then one other thing I'm curious about, with your experience on the player development side of things, is there a common denominator for a player who ends up going from good to great that you're starting to notice a trend, analyzing, watching, coaching all these guys? An example of a character trait we talk about a lot is grit, which, kind of applies to not just on field, it's off field too. So is there something, like grit that you've noticed in players' games that you've analyzed that have, really stood out over the last few years?
Yeah. So, the first question kind of relates to the second, which is, you have to be good enough or there's nothing else to talk about. And you have to figure out the best way for you to be good enough. What does that mean, good enough? It means a good enough student. It means a good person, a good enough athlete, skilled enough, and also having the kind of IQ that it would take to know how to play. And I think what everybody worries about is what team am I on and what showcases am I going to and is my team winning and things like this, when really we have to figure out the best model for being good enough. And by the way, loving the sport and, for the love of the game is such a great name because that's really what it's all about. So the common denominators, I mean, honestly, Corey, it's it's hard to answer that one quickly, but I can tell you this. I have had a complete paradigm shift myself over the last few years as a coach and as a person and how I evaluate player development and how I would prescribe it. And really, the funny thing is I'm just gone back to my own roots where when I grew up, there wasn't much club anything. There were very few camps. And what I did was I became really good at sports by playing backyard sports, by playing pickup and sandlot sports. And what I believe is that is the model. And the progress that I'm seeing out of people that are doing this is like none other that I've ever seen. And it teaches everything that you just talked about from the perspective of, first of all, love of the game, but also just the skill and the IQ and the grit. The grit comes out. I don't know if you remember playing pickup sports with your friends, but you didn't want to lose. And you competed on the sandlot, in a fair way. You weren't trying to have a stacked team. You didn't have a team that never lost in 5 years. You might lose on the sandlot 50% of the time, but you were competing and it was all about playing and loving the game. And oh, by the way, there is not a better model for getting better. And that's the avenue I'm going down along with a lifetime of studying and knowledge. You blend those together, it's pretty powerful.
I think my favorite videos that you post are literally you guys just playing pickup and like right outside your house. Like I could watch that for like 15. Like the other day, my wife was like, "What are you watching?" I'm like, Jamie's playing pickup with like, I don't even know who it was, like a couple kids down the street, and like I was like, that's all I want to do right now. I just want to get some kids together and go play pickup, and like it's so true. And also, like, you talked about when you play pickup and you're kind of learning through like those experiences. It's like, when does the game end, right? It's like, well, you guys decide when the game ends. So you could be out there for what, like 4 hours, like if you want to, like if no one's stopping you and you still have light and you have an opportunity to play. And like a lot of times too, it's like kids are getting pushed into, all right, you got this window, this amount of time, you got practice, now it's moving on. It's like, but what if you want to keep playing and keep getting better? It's like you no longer have that choice because it's taken away from you because everything's organized. But if you kind of move away from that and you're driving the bus, the kids are driving the bus, and you're out there, you can go have a stick in your hair for 5 straight hours. Like you're probably going to get so much better in those 5 hours than you would over like the course of a month playing like an hour and a half practice once a week. So I'm with you on that.
And it becomes, the funny thing is, like the whole goal of the Sandlot is really to keep the game going.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's the whole goal.
It might be the name of a new podcast, the Infinite Game.
Keep it going podcast.
I love it. All right, so I know you got to catch Colin. They're playing at 3:00. Where are they at the Mount today, or are they home?
Yeah. Mount St. Mary's at Georgetown, I think.
Awesome.
Maybe it's at Mount.
Where are you watching that? What network is that on?
I'm going to go to the website and click watch live, I guess. I'm not positive.
Doesn't matter as long as the connection's good, right? Cool. Well, Jamie, thanks so much, man, for coming on. We really appreciate your time. We're gonna be pushing this out here through our networks, through the Long Island Lacrosse Journal, through our YouTube channel, and hopefully we can check in again soon and just talk about all the great stuff that you're doing and and all the great stuff you've done and keep doing for the game. So thank you. Thank you so much. Love to come on anytime. It's really my pleasure. Awesome. Thanks, Jamie. And we'll be catching up with Jamie again soon. As we mentioned, we'll be live again next week, guys. Same time around 2:00 on the Streamcast Network. We'll be on YouTube and Facebook. We're going to be bringing on the co-founders of GLE. Jamie, you'll love this. These are 2 young Ithaca College alums, so obviously my dad loves them, right off the bat there. But they started a lacrosse-specific indoor training facility where they have strength, conditioning, speed, and agility, and then attached to it, there's a warehouse in the back with like probably it's about 45 yards by 20 yards turf area where they right now are just bringing in lacrosse players to basically kind of get that elite college training experience where you kind of get your strength and conditioning, and then right away for 45 minutes after that, you're getting your stick work, you're getting wall ball, and you're getting shooting all in one spot. And like these guys are killing it. They're developing some of the best players around Long Island. It's just a really cool spot. Also, we just go and sometimes hang out and play and just talk shop with them. And they do some cool stuff, and they talk about guys who just love the game. They're into it. It's a pretty cool thing. So we're bringing in those guys next week. Any questions you want us to ask them, Jamie, when they come on? Wow, it's a tough one. Yeah, I would love to know, basically what their how they like to develop players, their favorite way to develop players as complete players, dodgers, off ball, and shooters. Cool. We'll definitely ask that. And Jamie, thanks again for coming on, man. Thanks, Mike.